Hey Astro Kids, and welcome back. This will be a review of the Black Moon Astrology deck. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through the cards. Starting off here, we have the Sun card. Very cool imagery on here. Then we have the Moon card. It says Soul. See, make sure that, okay, so we have Mercury here, which says Mine. I love the image here because Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, is corresponding with Mercury. Then we have Venus, Love. We have Mars, Force. Saturn, Truth. I love the colors on this one. Jupiter, Abundance. Very cool. I like the lightning in the image as well, corresponding with Jupiter being the Roman god of Olympus, the god of thunder and lightning. We have Chiron here. Healing. Chiron is the wounded healer. We have Uranus here, Genius. Neptune, Sacrifice. Pluto, Transformation. Also love the colors in this. Black Moon, Lilith, Mystery. Right, Black Moon, Lilith is dealing with the hidden levels of the psyche, deep-rooted desires, fears, insecurities. So going really deep into the psyche. Aries, I Am. Right, as Aries does correspond with the first house, which goes back to self, to identity, to the physical body. Taurus, I Have, corresponding with the second house, our earthly possessions, things that we find value and worth in. Gemini, I think, corresponding with the third house, early education, communication. Cancer, I Feel. I like the imagery here as well. Right, Cancer goes back to the home, to family, going to that fourth house. Leo, I Will, corresponding with that fifth house of passion, creativity, right? What we create and put out to the world. Virgo, I Analyze. I love the colors in this one. Libra, I Balance. Which is interesting. I've never seen I Balance used before as the motto for Libra, I usually see I relate, but definitely corresponding back to that balance scale of give and take. Scorpio, I transform. Some also say Scorpio, I desire. I love the image here as well. Sagittarius, I see. Some say I seek for Sagittarius as well. Very much about adventure and going out seeking new opportunities. And I like the color in here as well. Capricorn, I use. Some say I utilize. Same thing, right? Aquarius, I know. I've also seen some say Aquarius, I change. But Aquarius very much about sharing with humanity. And so there is a level of collective knowledge when we're dealing with Aquarius. These are very cool images. I love the image here for Pisces. It says, I believe. Some say Pisces, I dream. Same concept here. Pisces, this very artistic, creative, imaginative type of energy. Okay, so they do go through the houses as well. So we have first house, the body. Second house, owning. I love the coins on there. Again, going back to those earthly possessions and the things that we find value and worth in, the things that we've collected and worked to build up in our lives. Third house, messages. Again, corresponding back to Gemini, dealing with communication. Fourth house, roots. Again, going back to family, going back to the home. So where are your roots? How were you influenced growing up, right? Going back to the roots, back to the home. Fifth house, creativity. Again, that Leo energy of what are you going to create? What are you going to put out there? Sixth house, routine, corresponding with Virgo, right? So dealing with those everyday routines, responsibilities, our health, the things that we need to get done in our lives on a personal level. Seventh house, partners. Right, so the seventh house starts with the descendant, which is the opposite of the ascendant. So coming off of identity in the body, this is dealing with relationships and marriage. Eighth house, endings and beginnings. I love how they describe this, and I love the imagery on here as well. This is definitely a difficult house. There's a lot that we could discuss about the eighth house, right? But a big part of what the eighth house is dealing with is endings and beginnings, right? That intense transformation of life, death, rebirth. Ninth house, faith. Very cool imagery on here. But again, that ninth house relating to religion, philosophy, understanding, seeking higher knowledge. And we have 10th house, the world. Again, great description for the 10th house. There's definitely a lot that you could say about the 10th house, right? Our status, our reputation, how we're seen in the public, how we interact with the public. 11th house, friends. Definitely dealing with friendship. Also dealing with our hopes and dreams, our long-term goals being fulfilled as well. And of course, House of Friends also corresponds with this, dealing with any kind of social groups, social gatherings that you're in. This is your connection to humanity. Twelfth house, escape. Absolutely, there's a lot that you could also say about the 12th house. Similar to the 8th house, very deep house we could really get into, dealing with the unraveling of self, right? So separating ourselves from ego and sacrificing ourselves to a higher connection, a higher calling, very much about spirituality. A lot of hidden knowledge as well, sort of similar to the 8th house when we're talking about spirituality and hidden knowledge, right? So there's a lot about the 12th house that you could really get into. Very, very deep house. And then we go into the elements. Fire element, desire. Right? Fire is that passionate, enthusiastic, creative, outgoing, straightforward type of energy. Earth, stability, right? Earth is much more slower than fire, about security, stability, caution, taking your time. Air is our connection, right? Communicating, relating, intelligence. Water going into our deeper feelings, intuition, emotion. The word that they chose was sensing. Very good word for this. And they even put the nodes in here, which is really cool. So North Node, life's purpose. Absolutely, there's a lot that we could say about the North Node. Essentially the direction of which we're being called into, to learn and to grow in our lives. So very karmic in terms of where we're being pulled in the direction of in this lifetime. South Node, life's debts. Absolutely. The South Node dealing with the things that we need to let go of, the things that we already know, the things that we've already learned, the things already ingrained in us. And for those of you who believe in past lives, the South Node is very much connected to your past life experiences. So everything that you've experienced in the past that you're being pulled away from, you're being called to release and let go. So life's debts is a perfect name for this. And I love the imagery on there as well, corresponding with, let me just show you this again. this South Node and North Node, the imagery very much corresponding with Rahu and Ketu, right? When we look at the North Node and South Node in Vedic, is that head of the dragon, and the tail of the dragon, right? And we can get into that in another video, but definitely going into the story and the mythology of that and how it plays a role into astrology and our karmic patterns and our life lessons. So very powerful imagery here. Very cool as well, they're getting into eclipses. So lunar eclipse change, definitely the lunar eclipse is a big moment of releasing. Very, very powerful for making changes in our lives. It is a divine calling. Whenever we're in an eclipse, it is a very intense moment of radical change, and it really does push you to release and let go and make those necessary changes. And I love the image in here as well. Solar eclipse revolution. Definitely solar eclipse definitely plays a role into the lunar eclipse. Solar eclipse is always going to be that new moon that starts the eclipse. So it is a call for a revolution. Definitely love that naming for it. It's a call for you to start making radical changes in your life. Right? To do something different, something unique. So those eclipses definitely help us to move out of the same old space to make very radical, intense changes in our lives. Part of fortune, increase. I don't typically work with the part of fortune, but it is definitely a point in astrology that can be utilized. So increase. Oh, and this is very cool as well. They're getting into these special angles, right, that create these very magical moments in the chart. So those of you born with a grand trine definitely have a lot of positive opportunities and blessings that you can create. And this is grand trine blessings. Grand Cross Provoker. Grand Cross is going to be a giant square that you'll find in your chart for some of you as well. And definitely it is formed off of these squares, which are challenging angles. So definitely provoker is a word that I like for this. It is showing you an area where you definitely have to work through, you definitely have to deal with some major life challenges, right? And we always say in astrology that it's not a negative aspect, it's a challenging aspect, right? So everything in astrology can be worked through. We can improve upon these energies in our charts. So nothing is set in stone, and nothing is necessarily negative. And it looks like they stop here with the yod. There are a few other special angles that can be created in the chart as well, such as a kite. So we can get into that later on. But we have the yod here, also known as the finger of God, and they use the term destiny here. So it is a destined point. It is a destined moment of creating opportunities and positivity in your life. So if you're born with a yod, this is very powerful. And they are getting into returns as well, which is really cool. It doesn't look like they have all the returns on here. There's quite a few returns that we can get into, but Jupiter return is definitely a really great moment for many people who go through this, right? This will be the moment where Jupiter returns to the place where it was at your moment of birth, which does set up a time period where a lot of blessings, a lot of opportunities, a lot of positivity can enter into your life. So the word they use here is benefits from this Jupiter return. And they have Saturn return, which is one of the most important returns, in my opinion, as an astrologer. This is a major moment, especially the first Saturn return that many people go through in their lives, which is usually around 29 or 30 years old, somewhere around there, around that time frame, right? It varies from person to person, but definitely around 29, 30 years of age is when you have your first Saturn return. I have not had mine yet, but I am going through a Saturn square at the moment, so I know that Saturn phases in your life are very challenging ones to go through. It's definitely a time of maturity and going through major lessons and really establishing that identity or that structure of really how you want your life to look. So definitely Saturn return is a moment where people tend to become more stable, more secure, more rigid in their beliefs, right? They start to come into this space of maturity and really starting to settle down in life. So this is this Saturn return moment. And the word they use for this is age. Definitely a time where you are starting to grow and mature. And that was all the returns that they use. Again, we can do a video. Comment below if you were interested on the different returns and what they mean for you in your chart. So next we get into Mercury retrograde, and this is the only retrograde that they actually have in this deck. There are definitely a lot of other retrogrades, right? Each of the planets have their own retrograde. But Mercury retrograde is definitely one that is talked about a lot. It is definitely one that tends to affect many people, and it is because we have about 3 Mercury retrogrades per year, right? So there are rare times where we do have 4 Mercury retrogrades a year, but commonly we do have 3 each year, as Mercury is a really fast-paced moving energy. And it is the smallest planet, so it is interesting that during a Mercury retrograde, people tend to freak out. But when the heavier, more intense energies go retrograde, it's a little bit of a different story. So we do have to keep in mind that Mercury retrograde typically is not as serious or not as difficult as we make it out to be. But it is a major moment of really taking the time, as Mercury is dealing with the way that we think and process information. It's dealing with our clarity, our intellect, our communication. And so Mercury retrograde is a time of slowing down the mind so that we can take a look at the past, reevaluate things, go over things, take the time to understand things, and really understand the lesson that the universe is trying to give us. And so it's a major moment where Mercury does slow down to give us this time to catch up with our mind, right? Because Mercury as the mind does move very quickly. So it gives us that opportunity to slow down the mind, to reassess things, and to really look at our lessons and the changes that we need to make in our lives. And the word that they do use here is reinvention. So I absolutely agree with that. It is a time to reinvent yourself. It's very cool that they also added this. This is the last card here. Void of course moon. Missing. Now in astrology, a lot of people don't talk about this void of course moon. So it's very interesting that they added this in here. I definitely think that it is something major that we should talk about in astrology. There's also a couple of moon phases that we also don't discuss as much in astrology either, including the dark moon and the balsamic moon that play a big role in our lives. This void of course moon is going to be when the moon isn't making any major aspects to anything, right? So it's kind of just out in the void, so to speak, right? In the middle of nowhere, not really interacting with any planets necessarily, kind of just off doing its own thing, which does create this feeling of loneliness, detachment, like there's something missing, because remember the moon does correspond to our emotional state. And so the word that they did use was missing, which is definitely what this void of course moon is dealing with. And I want to say this was definitely one of my favorite images here with this Mercury retrograde. I love what they did with these cards as far as the imagery, as far as how they explained each of the cards. I definitely think that this is a great tool for those of you who don't quite understand astrology as well, want to learn more about it, since it does come with descriptions. It also comes with a book as well that I didn't show you guys, but that will also help explain these different placements in astrology and what they mean. Of course, there is much more in astrology that you can learn that isn't in the cards, but I do think this is a great deck. I love this deck more than the Barbieri Zodiac Oracle deck because it does add more to it. And I do really love the imagery. I think these cards are actually bigger than my Barbieri Zodiac Oracle deck. Just see a size comparison. Just to show you that these are much bigger cards. So but that was my review of this Black Moon astrology deck. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, feel free to leave a like as well as a comment. If you are new to this channel, Don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell, and I will see you all in the next video.